Well, I wanted to thank you all for letting Missouri come and be represented here and give a pest update, and also letting our industry folks come and speak and give their perspective. We've got a lot of resource in Missouri, of course, that we're concerned about because of thousand cankers disease, and you've heard the statistics that Tom Rutledge and Harlan Palm and many others have given, so I won't repeat that, but I'm going to kind of keep this simple and go over our survey results for thousand cankers disease, and also just touch upon real quick some of the other forest pest surveys that we've done. So for our thousand cankers disease survey in Missouri, we've worked together real closely with the Missouri Department of Conservation and Simeon Wright and the folks there to kind of coordinate our surveys and make sure we're getting good coverage of the state, and kind of leveraging both of our resources to make sure that we can do that. So I guess going back just a little bit, some of the first survey we did for thousand cankers in Missouri was in 2010, just some preliminary work, some windshield survey and a lot of visual survey in different parts of the state, and kind of assessing and looking for areas where there were pockets of declining walnuts. In 2011, both of our agencies really had pretty systematic, extensive surveys throughout the state. It was all visual survey in 2011. Then, of course, in 2012, the pheromone and the traps were available. So both of our agencies set out the Lindgren funnel traps with the baited with the walnut twig beetle pheromone. And then in 2013, again, both of our agencies did trapping and visual survey. Missouri Department of Ag really concentrated our efforts pretty heavily on the urban areas in 2013, which is kind of a departure of what we did in 2012. But we were able to hire 3 seasonal surveyors to cover the St. Louis metro, the Kansas City metro area, and then kind of in southwest Missouri down in the Springfield and Branson areas where we have a lot of tourism, and of course the walnut resource in that part of the state is really concentrated as well. So we were kind of looking for that urban risk pathway, I guess, that I think Harlan talked about earlier today. And so for those 3 areas, we set out about 50 of the Lindgren funnel traps in each of those 3 areas. I think it was 143 is what we actually ended up setting out total in the state. And then we did about 113 visual survey locations. And at those visual survey locations, if we saw symptomatic trees, we would collect branch samples out of those trees and take those back to our lab to process. But the other reason for doing the visual survey work was kind of to look forward to the following year and identify places where we had walnut decline, and we could set traps in those areas in the following year. So it was both survey work, but it was also scouting and preparation for trapping in the following year. Conservation Department kind of worked through central and northeastern Missouri and looked at a lot of high-risk sites associated with sawmills and campgrounds and other areas, and some plantations. So really looking at the high-risk pathways and concentrated walnut areas. So Conservation Department was able to set out 49 Lindgren funnel traps baited with the walnut twig beetle pheromone, and then really did a lot of visual survey and collecting branch samples. But for our part with MDA, really, I think the limiting factor for us in setting the traps out, I mean, there's expense involved in that, and it's time consuming to set the traps, but really I think the bottleneck is the sample processing. When you're collecting beetles from that many traps every 2 weeks, that's a lot of samples to clean and sort through and look for potential suspects. And I mean, you're cleaning out of these traps leaf debris and large insects and anything else that might wander in there. And so it's a lot of sample cleaning and very time consuming. So it takes months and months. I think we had something in the neighborhood of probably just short of about 750 individual sample collections to look through. So that's really our limiting factor for being able to put out more traps, is just that time resource. So to look at our survey locations for 2013, again, we really concentrated on the urban areas, St. Louis, Kansas City, and then down in southwest Missouri. for MDA's part, and then the Conservation Department worked in that big area there through central and northeast Missouri. And both of our agencies had some scattered locations in other parts of the state. But then going back for our 2011 through 2013 survey efforts, both visual and Lindgren funnel trapping, that's our coverage statewide that we've hit so far. I think we've been in every county, probably except for maybe 5 counties or so, and parts of the state where maybe there's not as much walnut resource or didn't identify yet locations to set traps or do visual survey. And as far as our other response efforts for the 1,000 Cankers threat to Missouri, there's several categories here that we've kind of targeted. And Simeon has kept a list of activities that our multiple agencies have done in the state. And really it's been a great thing to have is where we've been, so we can kind of look forward to areas maybe that we haven't concentrated in yet, activities we haven't done, or audiences we haven't reached, and so we can use that to kind of plan for the future. So for planning and preparedness, I mean, there's several things that we've done, and starting with that conference in 2009 in St. Louis, I guess about a year before that, we kind of started hearing rumblings of some pest threat to walnut, and of course that really got our attention in Missouri. And I think it was very early in 2009, Whitney Cranshaw sent out an email on his list server that he's involved in, and really that was a wake-up call for me and many others, that we needed to look very close at this. And so at that point we started talking with the Conservation Department and others, and wanting to bring together any scientist in the country that had any knowledge of this thing, and get their take on it, start talking about response efforts nationally, what kind of research needed to be done, and start focusing everyone's efforts on how to deal with this new pest that we really didn't know much about, at least here in the Midwest or in the East. So that was a really big activity that kind of was a springboard for us. Within the state, we've done a lot of preparation work. We've done a lot of attended workshops. And I guess one thing I wanted to point out and thank some of the other states like Tennessee and Virginia who have hosted us in their states, and Colorado, where we can go and take our staff members, our field staff, and our specialists, and go see this thing up close and personal. It's a lot different than looking at it in pictures or on a website, but getting able to peel branch samples and look at the beetle and look at the cankers, that's really beneficial, and not just for this pest, but for Asian longhorn beetle and emerald ash borer and all these other things. Just having an opportunity to have a state that's found it to host other states and being able to take a look at it, that's really beneficial. So we attended as many of those things as we could, and got our staff there and trained up on how to look for this thing. We had an emergency meeting. The director of agriculture in Missouri called a meeting after it was detected here in Tennessee in the native range of black walnut, and had industry and other agencies there to kind of talk about our way forward. And another big activity that we've done, and I think a lot of states are doing this, but we've developed a Missouri Invasive Forest Pest Council with a lot of the agencies that have responsibilities over these issues. Years ago we had the Gypsy Moth Advisory Council, which is still active, and we had the Emerald Ash Borer Action Team. But all of these new forest pest threats that are facing our state, we've developed this Invasive Forest Pest Council to kind of bring everyone together and make sure we're communicating and working together towards the same goals. A lot of other things going on. The survey that I've talked about, there's the regulatory aspect, and of course back in 2009 and 2010 we started talking with a lot of other states about developing exterior state quarantines, and one of the goals that we all had was to work together and try to have as uniform as possible state quarantines across the country for states that were going to have exterior quarantines. So worked together with several states on that. And then as far as outreach, we believe also that it's a really big component of responding to 1,000 Cankers disease. Conservation departments put together some really nice outreach materials. a brochure that's really geared towards helping people understand, how to identify a walnut and what the symptoms of Thousand Cankers disease are. And they also developed a wallet card. Our agencies have websites with information. Also put together, Simeon Wright put together an FAQ sheet for Thousand Cankers disease, and that's really been helpful to kind of get that baseline information out to folks. We've been to every trade show we can get to, industry meetings where we can talk to, arborists and frontline people, about the symptoms of Thousand Cankers disease so they can report that. Paul Shalou mentioned yesterday the emerald ash borer detection in Kansas City, and that was an arborist that found that, and we believe that's due to a lot of the outreach efforts we've had in Missouri on emerald ash borer. And when that guy saw the tree with the galleries and everything in it, he immediately recognized emerald ash borer, and he knew exactly who to call. He called the Conservation Department office there in Kansas City, and immediately folks were out there looking at it and verifying it. So, we have that same goal with Thousand Cankers disease and other pests, is training those first detectors to go out and look for this thing and know who to report to. I think that's probably as good or even better than some of our formal survey efforts. So that's one of our goals, is to train just as many people as we can to look for this thing. And then there's research efforts going on in Missouri as well. Mark Cogshaw at the University of Missouri has been working with, I think, Colorado and Tennessee, and evaluating some of our black walnut germplasm for resistance. Dr. Sharon Reed, who's here and has a poster back there too, has been doing work on looking at other bark beetles and fungi that are in black walnut, and also looking at the pathogenicity of those other fungi. So even in a state where there's no known Thousand Cankers disease at this point, there's a lot of good research going on. I'm just going to touch real quick on some of our other pest survey work. Emerald ash borer, of course, we found it in Missouri back in 2008 for the first time down in southeast Missouri and in Wayne County, and we didn't have any more detections until 2012, and we had that detection in Kansas City and the metro area there. And then 2013 also was a very active year for new detections from our purple trap surveys. So we had several more additional counties in southeast Missouri, and then also Pulaski County there, that's kind of in central to south central Missouri, and then Jackson County, which on the Missouri side is the kind of the main part of the Kansas City metro area. Because of all those new detections, and then also discoveries up in southeastern Iowa and proximity to detections in Illinois and so forth, we decided to go ahead and go to a full statewide quarantine. So all of Missouri now is regulated under state and federal quarantine for emerald ash borer. And just kind of looking close up there at the map, and some of those other detections, like there in southeastern Iowa, there's a couple of detections up there, really about 30 miles or so from the northern Missouri border. And then in Illinois, in Salem, Illinois, kind of their southern detection is really about 70 miles straight east of the St. Louis area. And that really confounds us to this point that we've not found it in St. Louis. There's a lot of firewood in southeast Missouri and those detection areas that for years prior to those detections have moved up to St. Louis in large quantities. We've done a lot of survey work in St. Louis with trapping, and the Arborist Association there is very organized and aware of emerald ash borer, and they're out looking for it. And we get a lot of homeowner calls and calls from professional arborists, and just not found it there yet. But we assume that it's probably in multiple other locations in the state. And so we felt with the widespread distribution of emerald ash borer in Missouri, it was time to go ahead and go to a statewide quarantine to protect movement of that thing out of Missouri into other states. We do have a lot of emerald ash borer work ongoing. One of our big projects that Anastasia Becker here with Missouri Department of Ag has been working on the last couple of years is releases of the 3 parasitoids that Paul Shalou mentioned yesterday. Our first releases were in Wayne County in 2012. We did more releases in 2013, and we're looking at the possibility of doing releases in Platte County, which is in the Kansas City metro area, in 2014, as well as more releases in southeast Missouri. Survey for 2014 for emerald ash borer, we just learned that since we have a statewide quarantine now, we will not be receiving federal funding, but we do intend to continue with some level of the purple trapping survey in 2014. We'll probably really focus up on some of the urban areas and a few high-risk sites. And also, we still get a lot of homeowner calls and calls from arborists about suspect trees, and so we continue to follow up on all of those. We've still got a lot of outreach going on. We'd like to do more first detector training workshops. We're still very actively involved in going to trade shows and industry meetings and getting the firewood message out there. So we look for every opportunity to again target the arborists and so forth. And we do have a multi-agency website, eab.missouri.edu, and that's housed at the University of Missouri. But just looking at the I guess you'd call it the metrics on that website over the last 4 years, we've really seen a significant uptick on the website on traffic there. We get thousands of hits a month over the last couple of years since we've been doing a lot of really targeted outreach. Still a lot of work on the federal quarantine enforcement. Of course, with the statewide quarantine, there are a lot more folks that need compliance agreements to move, firewood and logs and lumber and so forth. So that work is really going to take an uptick this year. And then, of course, our Missouri Invasive Forest Pest Council still meets regularly and coordinates all of these activities. I'll mention real quick Gypsy moth. Since 1967, we've been surveying the state of Missouri for gypsy moth, and we work together with Missouri Department of Conservation and USDA PPQ, and also the Missouri National Guard and the U.S. Army are also partners in that survey. They survey their military installations in the state. Last few years, we've kind of had a downturn in trap captures, which is great. So we had 5 moths total that we captured this year in Missouri, and kind of a similar pattern to what we see in past years. We'll often see detections in St. Louis, Kansas City, and southwest Missouri, where we have a lot of population and a lot of tourism. So all of our agencies together put out about 6,700 traps this year in 56 of our 114 counties. And just looking historically from 1980 to 2013, each of those dots represents a gypsy moth detection in the state. So again, you can really see the cluster of detections, especially around St. Louis, but then also in Kansas City and down in southwest in the Branson area where we have a lot of tourism. And then just looking at the graph of captures over time, Donna Leonard mentioned yesterday that you have these, I think, like 4 to 7 year cycles in gypsy moth captures, and we generally see that in Missouri as well. We have a lot lower captures than what folks out east are seeing. And then finally, pine shoot beetle. We detected pine shoot beetle in Missouri for the first time last year in 3 northeastern counties, and we went back in 2013 and did more survey and detected it in a couple of more counties. Thankfully, there's not a lot of forest products industry in that part of the state, particularly anyway with pine. We do have still some Christmas tree farms up in that part of the state, 3 of them in those regulated counties, so we do compliance agreement with those Christmas tree farms. But for the most part, those locations are choose and cut, and the trees don't move very far. But we do continue trapping at those Christmas tree farms to confirm that we don't have pine shoot beetle at those locations, and we do visual inspections as well.